What's going on, guys? My name's Josh, and I'm back today with the Shining Vale Episode 2 recap. Now, before we get started, if you could do me a favor, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Then you better watch out, because it's time to get this video started. Let's go. What's going on, guys? So yes, I just finished episode 2 of Shining Vale, and I gotta say, I like this episode a lot more. I feel like that first episode kind of started out a little bit slow. I know it was mainly, setting up the story, kind of getting to know the characters, where I feel like this episode, because that was already set up, we were able to just kind of jump right in. And I gotta say, I enjoyed this episode a lot more. I think one thing with the first episode, first of all, this show is supposed to be a horror/comedy, and I didn't find while I enjoyed the first episode, it really wasn't scary or funny, where I feel like this episode was a little bit better as far as both. It's definitely, to me, not, as a huge horror fan, it's definitely not scary, but there definitely was a little bit more creepy moments in this episode, just maybe one or two. And I feel like the comedy, we got to see a lot more comedy, the comedy of the show in this episode, and I definitely appreciated the humor more in this episode, and I feel like we got to know the characters better too. So I feel like the first episode we spent a lot of time with Pat, and the rest of her family were kind of annoying, and I feel like this episode we kind of get to see them a little bit more, and I kind of like her family a little bit more, and I get to appreciate their characters more now in episode 2. So let's get into, I guess we'll start with the episode 2 recap. So pretty much the episode starts off with Pat. She can't sleep. She's kind of tossing and turning. She's kind of hot. And then she kind of wakes up and sees someone walking outside her door. She hears footsteps. So she kind of gets up thinking it's the kids. She kind of gets up to investigate. And she ends up going downstairs, where she sees in one of the closets, there's a yellow ribbon sticking out of the closet. She kind of goes down the stairs, and as she goes towards the closet, the ribbon's pulled in the closet. So it's she goes up there, she's a little creeped out. She opens the door, she kind of goes in the closet, and next thing you know, the closet door shuts, and it's the woman from the window. Pretty much, she sees her, and the woman tells Pat, "Use your words," and she burns her with a cigarette. Pat kind of freaks out, but then she wakes up. So then she realizes it was a dream, and she falls out of bed. And then we kind of see a little scene where, then she's trying to go back to sleep. The alarms are going off. Jake, he had a bad dream, so he climbs in bed with his parents. The alarms go off. So we kind of got to see a little bit more of their chaotic family and what their mornings look like. But yeah, so that was one thing. She kind of wakes up. She pretty much had a nightmare of the woman from the window, and the woman from the window burned her with a cigarette. Later, once Pat fully wakes up, she realizes that she was actually burned with a cigarette. So she kind of goes to Terry. She tells Terry, the dream I had, or the lady I've been seeing, the woman from the window, I had a dream about her. She, burned me with a cigarette, and look, I have a cigarette burn. Terry, being Terry, tries to, rationalize it and say, I don't think you got it from your dream. I think you got burned by when you made bacon. And then she kind of said, when was the last time I made bacon? But he just will not accept anything. He just really tries to rationalize everything. And he just never believes, as far as Pat. Next, it's in the morning, and we kind of see the family all having breakfast, and we kind of get to see how the kids are doing, how they're adjusting to, their new school. Gaynor is kind of all dressed up, almost wearing a turtleneck. Pat kind of goes up to her like, why are you wearing a turtleneck? Are you hiding a hickey? When really, she's hiding a cross, which I guess is kind of just out of left field for her. And then we see, Jake, he said he met an online friend, he met a virtual friend, and the family's like, we don't really trust that. We think whoever that person is an adult, is a creep. Later, then we see, there's a knock on the door, and pretty much the boy from next door stops by, and he is there for Gaynor. And pretty much he met her through a chastity club, which a chastity club is just pretty much a club where they are, abstaining from sex. And Gaynor has joined this club, obviously, because she, likes this guy. So this is where, why she's wearing a cross is because, she met some cute guy. And then next we see the mom, the next door neighbor's mom also stops by. And this is the mom that, Pat has seen a few different times, who's been kind of staring at the house and being kind of giving her weird looks. So she sees the mom, and the mom's being really weird, kind of holding her cross, and pretty much tells Pat to stay strong and don't let the spirits in. Pat, just kind of a little bit creeped out by this lady, ends up shutting the door. And then Terry comes up, and Pat just is like, I really don't, trust this house. Something is really weird. And Terry said, we're not leaving, and we can't move. And then all of a sudden they look, and the closet door slams shut. They go investigate the door. Kind of Terry goes in there. He sees on the writing on the wall, there's like kids' names and like a height chart. And then pretty much Pat is like, you don't think something weird's going on? This door just shut itself. Where then, Terry's like, oh, it's just probably the screw. So he, again, rationalizes it. He actually goes to the kitchen where he goes to look at one of his tools, and he actually finds one of Frank's old tools. So the handyman that slept with Pat, he finds one of Frank's tools. This ends up them both back in a therapy session. Definitely, I think as far as this goes, Terry kind of tries to make sure everything's going okay and makes everything seem like it's good, when really he's really messed up by, the affair. But it seems like he bottles everything and just tries to put everything away and doesn't deal with his emotions. And the therapist is pretty much like, this isn't healthy to bottle all your emotions. They kind of then, pretty much, Terry deflects and says, well, Pat's seeing ghosts. Pat kind of explains herself, and they want to up her medication. And pretty much they agree that, maybe it's good that she gets out of her house and tries to make some friends. Later then we see that Pat meets with her editor, and she kind of shows her the piece that she wrote on the last episode. And editor actually likes this and says that, she kind of wants her to embrace all her crazy emotions and kind of go with it, because I think she thinks if she can embrace kind of the crazy, that she could end up writing a really good book. Where Pat is like, when she wrote the book the first time, she, at that point in her life was really out of control. She's an alcoholic, and she didn't want to embrace the crazy because she might go really over the edge. But the editor is kind of like, embrace the crazy, but just don't go all the way over the edge. Go close to the edge. So later then, we see Terry goes to visit Frank, the handyman. He's pretty much confronting Frank for answers. He wants to know kind of what happened. And then Frank pretty much reveals that, it was all kind of an accident. Pat came on to him, and one thing led to another, and he couldn't help himself. They had sex. But he definitely is not in love with, Pat. Terry is shocked by all this, that Pat came on to... Pat came on to Frank. He always thought that, Frank came on to Pat. So finding out that, Pat was the aggressor in the situation was shocking to him. And he sees that Frank has a fancy coffee machine, and as his way of payback, he's going to take the fancy coffee machine with him, and he decides to grab it, and he's gonna take that as payment. Which is funny. It was a funny scene, though, because he goes to grab the coffee machine and he can't carry it, and Frank has to help him. Then we see Pat goes to the store. She's going to pick up a book called Bell Jar from the local bookstore. While she's there, she sees Robin, the realtor, and Robin's meeting with like the Shiny Vale auxiliary group or some kind of club pretty much in town. It's with a bunch of the people from the town. Robin tells about, the book that Pat wrote, and the group's kind of all just kind of a little bit judgy and say, oh, I read that book, or I had that book, someone gave me that as a gag gift. Really, they're just kind of a judgy group, and Pat doesn't want anything to do with them, and she just kind of excuses herself. She goes home, and she sees the closet door open again, or she sees the ribbon under there in the closet. She goes, checks it out. She goes in the closet, and pretty much she sees hands coming out of the closet, and then she kind of wakes up, and she's in the attic again. And she's in the attic again. She looks in her bag, and the book she bought wasn't the book the Bell Jar book. She wakes up, and the book she has is her book. She bought her own copy of her book. So then she's kind of like thrown off by this. So then pretty much Jake's friend, his online friend, he invited him to dinner. They're having dinner. they're all kind of freaked out because, you know, they think Jake's friend is a child molester and not someone his own age. A guy knocks on the door that Terry answers. He thinks this is like Jake's friend, and he's kind of like freaked out by him because it's an adult. Where then the guy reveals that no, his son is with him, and he just came to the door because his son met an online friend. He thought his son might have been a child molester. So it's kind of very awkward, but yes, so Jake has a friend his own age, and then this dad pretty much of this friend invites himself in and invites himself to dinner. You know, Terry, Pat, and this guy, I think his name is Larry, all have dinner. It's a little awkward. Larry's definitely awkward, and he says his wife's cheating on him, which is a sore subject for Pat and Terry. Pat ends up going into the kitchen, and pretty much then Terry comes in there, and Pat just says kind of like she made a mess of things, and she tells him about the editor, how the editor says to embrace the crazy, but she doesn't want to embrace the crazy because if she embraces the crazy and, you know, Terry ends up losing it from holding everything in, where will this leave the kids? And pretty much Terry is telling her to, you know, calm down and not to freak out. And she tells Terry to stop mansplaining things where he always tries to put a reasonable explanation to everything. She might just be going crazy. Terry then shows pretty much shows Pat the new espresso machine that he has. But Pat realizes, she goes, is that Frank's espresso machine? And then this all clicks in Terry's head that, you know, as far as this, Pat was over at Frank's house. Pretty much Pat told him that Pat and Frank only slept together one time, but then pretty much Frank now realizes the truth. He says that, you know, you lied to me. You said that that Frank came on to you. You came on to Frank. And then she pretty much tells him that, you know, it wasn't just a one-time thing. They kind of hooked up for a week. They had an affair for the week, and she's sorry. And she kind of she fucked up their marriage, she fucked up their family, and whatever, you know, they have left, she's not trying to fuck it up now, and she's really, really trying hard to keep it together. And the two kind of have a soft moment, and they give each other a hug, and you can tell they're really trying to fight for their marriage, and they're trying. And then we see the neighbor is watching them, and it's a little awkward. The neighbor is definitely awkward for sure. So then we see, you know, Pat sleeping. She kind of turns over, and then the woman from the window, the ghost, appears again, and she again tells Pat, use your words. Pat kind of wakes up from her dream, and then she's been finding this random, her book kind of all around. There's like words highlighted in the book. So she actually goes downstairs and uses the words that were circled in the book, and she has kind of like Scrabble, and she's putting all these words together, the words that were circled, and trying to figure out like what the message is. Eventually, she is able to, she's doing this for hours. Eventually, she comes up with the words, or the ghost helps her comes up with the words, Daisy was last to die. Pat runs to the closet. She looks at the kind of height chart in there to look at the names, and then she does see it's Daisy. She kind of hears a weird noise and sees a hole through the wall. She goes to kind of look at it, and all of a sudden the door shuts, and the woman from the window appears again, and she tells her, good news, Patricia, you're not crazy, and the door shuts. And yeah, so that's the way episode 2 ends. I definitely enjoyed, like I said, this episode a lot more. I feel like the humor of the show came through a lot more, especially with the characters. The characters are now starting to become definitely more likable, especially Terry. And even the kids, I'm starting to like them more now. And just overall, the overall humor for the show. Still not necessarily scary at all, but there definitely was a couple of intense moments with the ghost where, you know, Pat was checking out the closet. So I'm definitely seeing a little bit more horror elements, but definitely a lot more of the comedy. And it's interesting seeing more of this mystery. Kind of seeing what the heck's going on. This ghost is definitely haunting, you know, Pat, not messing with any of the rest of the house. But just judging by the town, judging by this ghost, yeah, they definitely died in that house. And, you know, Pat's finding out more and more. And I definitely think the way this next episode goes, especially with the ghost shutting the door, I do think we're going to find out some more episodes in the next episode. But yeah, overall, I would say I enjoyed this episode a lot more. I feel like we got more of the story, and I'm excited to see kind of where it goes next episode. I'm definitely enjoying a lot of the characters a lot more, but 2 episodes in, I am liking Shiny Vale. But what do you guys think? You know, what did you think of episode 2? Are you still liking the show? Do you like the characters a little bit more? How do you like the humor? Is the humor growing on you? Either way, please leave your comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching.